what do you believe are the top policy priorities affecting food insecurity in Iowa? And Nicole, I'm going to go ahead and have you go ahead and start us off.
All right, thanks. Good morning, everyone. I'm very excited to be here to share some thoughts on this. Of course, I am a practicing family practice physician, so hunger and food insecurity I see every day, and cannot underscore, as the video mentioned, that food is medicine. So one of the top policy priorities I see from a medical perspective is increasing the quality of food that people have access to. We see frequently how people can be overfed, but undernourished. At first glance, obesity may seem like an oxymoron when talking about food insecurity, but in reality, they're very intertwined. Fast food is very cheap and available, whereas healthy, nutritious food can be harder to find, can take longer to prepare, and in general can just be more expensive. We know that fresh fruit and vegetables are harder to find as well as more expensive in lower income communities than they can be in other areas. Similarly, a lot of the food pantries and homeless shelters rely on donations for feeding the hungry, and oftentimes those donations are more carbohydrate centric, such as cakes and cookies, and don't provide the nutrition that humans really need to be able to thrive. So certainly those foods can fill an empty belly, but I think in the United States, really our push with all the resources that we have at our disposal is to move toward looking at what best prepares us for long-term gains, not necessarily just the short-term gains. And how can we both address the needs of food insecurity short-term, but also ensure that our community is set up to thrive long-term, and that we are not putting them at additional risk for high blood pressure, diabetes, and most timely, COVID-19, given how nutrition and healthy food we've now seen is linked to your risk of COVID-19 as well.
Thank you, Nicole. Brian, we're going to have you go ahead and go next.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you all for Luke and Matt and Nicole for all the things that you do on the front lines. I'm in the Iowa House of Representatives and representing East Polk County. And we certainly have food insecurity issues here, but in the House, certainly, we're not addressing those on a daily basis like you all. So thank you for everything you guys do. And, the food insecurity, not just from an Iowa House standpoint and my role in the legislature, but it's one of those things that are near and dear to my family and my family's foundation. And we've been able to, participate in helping in a small way some of the initiatives around the Polk County. So happy to have been part of that and look forward to continuing to do that. From a policy standpoint, from a legislative standpoint, one of the things that we looked at last year, and I think we'll continue to look at, but it's a much larger issue, and is these cliff effects that affect some of the issues that families face when they're trying to better themselves. They have a job, they're working hard. Childcare cliff effect, for example, we addressed that, tried to address that this last legislative session. That's one of our top priorities in creating more off ramps as opposed to these cliffs, so that when people face a decision as to, do I take a job that makes more money so that I can afford food better, so I can put food on the table and feed my children, feed myself, they're not disincentivized from doing that because they're going to lose the benefits that they need in order to keep that job. Like I said, childcare cliff effect is just one of those issues. I think there's several other of those barriers. And that's really where I think our role is in the legislature is to identify those barriers and do as much as we can to eliminate them and or soften them, and to make sure that people are able to get the food on the table that they need.
Thank you, Brian. Matt?
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for the opportunity to be on the panel with Nicole and Luke and Brian, and for everything the Business Record is doing to elevate this issue. Thank you for your leadership. I'm Matt Russell. I'm the Executive Director of Iowa Interfaith Power and Light. We're a statewide nonprofit. We work with the faith community actually people of faith and conscience, to find solutions to the climate crisis. So that's an environmental problem, but it's intersectional. So as the climate crisis gets worse, we're seeing people hunger. We're seeing more people hungry, more economic disruption, and including the pandemic, right? So lots of things are being accelerated. The military says that climate change is a threat multiplier. What I like to say is climate action is an equity multiplier. So if we focus on the solutions to climate change, the only way to do that really effectively is to do it in a systems approach and a community approach, and the solutions to being more resilient and to actually, coming up with systems that don't emit, those systems actually can help us become a better community. So increase food security, increase equity, increase livelihoods, all of those things. So that's the overarching thing. And so we're very interested in hunger and solutions to hunger. But also I'm a farmer. So I've been farming really all my life. Grew up in Western Iowa on a commodity farm. And now in Marion County, we have a small farm where we do mostly all direct to customers. So beef and produce, and we used to do eggs. And we've participated with DMARC and others. So we've done a lot of donating of food and money, because money is actually better than food, to help those places buy things. So on the policy question, I think the most important policy issue right now, like if I could pick one thing to throw the lever, it's SNAP. It's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and a lot of people know it used to be called food stamps. So the SNAP program, and in Iowa, I think it's called Iowa Nutrition. Luke will correct me. I just am so familiar with calling it SNAP, but in Iowa, it has a unique name. And we've done some creative things in Iowa with farmers markets and SNAP, making it possible for people using SNAP to buy food from farmers. We saw some expansion in the time of COVID here with some existing programs, and even did some creative things when school lunch programs, when kids weren't going to school, using the SNAP program to get them some additional resources, so those students, weren't as food insecure. But it's an incredibly efficient program. As taxpayers, we put in $1 and we get $1.60 return. It's used if that electronic benefit ends up in a family's hands. They're typically using 100% of that benefit in the month that they get it, because actually I think they have to. They can't really hold on to it. So the dollars go into our community. They go into grocery stores. They support jobs. They support choice, so that families that have this benefit are able to live in the community and make choices within the community. And it has a really high approval rating. Like when AARP did a survey a few years ago, and it's like 70% of Iowans like SNAP and support expanding SNAP. So that's my tip-off policy suggestion.
Thank you, Matt. Luke, you want to help us with the name of the program, and then we'll let you introduce yourself a little bit too.
Yeah, and I did see someone leave it in the chat. It's known as food assistance in the state of Iowa.
Great.
But hi, everyone. Thank you, Chris, and thank you for holding this really important discussion. Thank you, everyone who's tuning in. My name is Luke Elzinga. I am the Communications and Advocacy Manager at the DMARC Food Pantry Network, which is based in Des Moines. We serve Polk County. Last year, we assisted over 57,000 unique individuals through our network of food pantries. I'm also the chair of the Iowa Hunger Coalition, which is a statewide advocacy group that focuses on advocating for policies that will reduce food insecurity. And as we're talking about policy, over the summer in response to COVID, we've seen some really positive actions taken both by the federal and state government and city and counties as well to address the increase in food insecurity. But the pandemic did not create food insecurity in Iowa. It certainly made it worse. Like a lot of other existing kind of crises, affordable housing, childcare, they were around before the pandemic began. And certainly things are being made worse right now, and I think it's going to take some time to really get back to where we were. So I really, I'm happy that we've seen a response from our government to step in and support food pantries and food banks, increase the SNAP benefit temporarily. But I worry about kind of once COVID's out of the news, what the situation looks like, and would love to see, sustained investment from our state government in fighting hunger. And also just want to point out, I've heard a few comments that we need to be thinking long-term too. And, food pantries, food banks, anti-hunger groups are starting increasingly to advocate kind of around these root cause issues of housing and childcare and wages, because food insecurity doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's an intersecting issue of poverty. And so even if we're trying to solve food insecurity on its own, we just will never be able to completely, end hunger in Iowa without addressing some of these other intersecting issues.